each part of us, each cell that is in our body holds a picture of the whole. Us as a human being, we're also expressing and reflecting what is going on outside in a bigger way. For all the advances in medicine, we're a sicker culture and society than we've ever been. There's something so out of balance. Masculine, feminine, yin, yang, activity, rest, and each individual piece of us is a reflection of the whole.
Welcome to the Wildflow podcast with me, Charlotte Puanto, certified cycle and feminine embodiment coach and shamanic womb guide. In this podcast, I'll share my wisdom and conversations with powerful change makers, thought leaders, and embodied teachers to invite you to live cyclically in flow with your menstrual cycle instead of fearing it, to heal menstrual shame and normalize womb wisdom and period positivity, and to step into your sovereign magnetic power to create and embody the change you desire to see in your world. Settle in to unleash your wild flow. What does what's happening in the cosmos, on the earth, and in our family environments have to do with our menstrual cycles and menopause experience? That's what this week's guest, Tracey Stevens from The Healing Point, is here to share with us in this beautiful, rich conversation going into energetics and the world of root cause, emotional aspects of ill health and menstrual cycle problems. So let me introduce you to Tracey. After spending more than 30 years working in the health industry, first in Western medicine, then moving into Eastern medicine and acupuncture specifically, Tracey Stevens realized that there was much more to ill health than just physical symptoms. She went on an energetic and spiritual journey to understand the deeper reasons for physical imbalances, and her journey took her through many and varied healing modalities, leading her to a greater awareness of the roots of illness. Tracey now has a passion for teaching and educating other people and practitioners in the root cause awareness to facilitate their own and their clients' healing journeys. Tracey is also one of my guest teachers on my first Moon Circle facilitator training, where I first had a conversation with her about the ancestral implications of how the women in our lineage before us experienced their menstrual cycles and how that ripples out in us today. It was fascinating. So I'm really glad to be able to bring Tracey to the Wildflow audience, and I hope that you enjoy listening into what she has to share with us today. Hi, Tracey. Welcome to the Wildflow podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me on. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you. You've been really inspiring me with the work that you're sharing, everything that you're doing on Instagram. So I'm really excited for another beautiful conversation and to learn from you and see what's been coming through for you. I'd love to start with a cycle check-in, as I do with all my guests. So I would just love to ask you, whether if you have a menstrual cycle, whereabouts you are in that cycle, how that feels to you. If you don't have a menstrual cycle, are there any cycles that you work with? And how are you feeling in that today?
Great. Well, I'm at the other end. So I am now in more of a straight line rather than the cycle, because I'm now in menopause, and that has been an ongoing process of moving. I always think of this the menopause process as moving from this circular cycle into this straight line, and it takes a while to become in that straight line. So but that doesn't mean to say that I'm not affected by the moon, and I'm still aware of what's happening in the universe. And I do follow the moon cycles, as in I'm just checking in sometimes, maybe I haven't slept as well. And I think, oh yeah, there's a full moon or something like that. So I do follow the moon cycle still. and just see where I'm at with it. But yeah, I'm good today, thank you. Yeah, we're in between that. We're coming up to a full moon, aren't we, soon? I don't usually sleep that well over a full moon, but no, it's all good. I'm feeling good, thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing and how that experience is for you, and how you're talking about coming out of the spiral and into that linear line. And I love that you're, still feeling connected to what's going on in the universe and those cycles around you. And just a question, do you feel like on a level there is a very subtle rhythm still there, a cyclical rhythm, or really it just feels quite linear to you? Just curious.
Um, Nothing feels linear to me, I suppose. The truth is, because what and especially the work that I do is I'm so aware of what comes up in my environment or my experience and how it affects my emotional body. So I'm always assuming that things aren't random for me. So is there a cycle still? There's not so much of a cycle, if I'm completely honest, but I have an awareness of that there is an ebb and flow, particularly with things like mood or sleep. But I suppose I spend more of my time now just noticing what comes up in my experience and going, I wonder why that's come up, and I wonder why I feel like this today.
I love that. So still
So
having that awareness of what you're experiencing, even if you're not matching it against a menstrual cycle, you're still really aware of, that connection to the outer seasons and cycles
absolutely.
and life and phases of life and all of that, and how that, just checking in with yourself, how are you feeling today? That's really lovely.
Yes, yeah, and I
Yeah.
do believe that all the planets have just a massive effect on you. So it's really interesting to me. I'm not an astrologer by any shape or means, but I like to follow what's happening with the planets and how it's affecting the world and how it's affecting us.
Tell me more. Do you what do you notice? What's happening in the, is it with the planets and the transits, and is there something that you particularly notice has a real influence over you?
Well, I suppose I'm listening to astrologers and I'm hearing what they're saying about the transits that are coming up. But what I
Mm.
really notice is that what's reflected in us is the state of the whole world. So, I see a lot of upheaval in their personal lives, and that just seems to reflect this big global shift that's been happening, especially over the last couple of years. I think more people are aware of what's happening on the planet and the shifts it's created inside of us. And then when you go to the astrology, you find these mirrors in terms of what the transits or the squares are doing with particular planets, and what's influencing what. And I'm not very clear about. I couldn't tell you what the transits were at the moment, but I know that I just follow it every month and just go, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, that curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something that I don't know much about either, and I'd really like to learn more. But just I think that there is definitely such a, that it, like you say, that mirror, that maybe gravitational pull or whatever it is. But it's hard to, you can't deny that what is going on around us is really reflecting and influencing what's going on within us. And like you said, I think that that's what the last couple of years has really brought to everyone's attention, isn't it? You can't not see it now. Everything that's going
No.
on, it's affecting us in terms of, changing the way we live, changing the way that we work, the way that we, the things we value, the very structures of our
Yeah.
day to day, and that's got to have an impact on our bodies and our, biochemistry and our
Yeah.
health.
Oh, without a doubt.
Mm.
And I just see these repeating patterns because I don't know if you know of fractals, these repeating patterns. And the more you look at one part of it, the more it just represents and follows the whole pattern. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but basically.
Yeah, but I don't know the word fractal.
Okay, well, rather than go into it now, it's probably just worth looking up at some point, because it's a mathematical pattern that we see repeating. But there's always this ancient Hermetic law of as above, so below. So what happens in the macrocosm is also happening in the microcosm. What's happening in the universe is happening within ourselves, like we're a complete representation of the whole universe. So you might look at all the if the globe and the planet is one body, then we as humans are all the cells, and we're just reflecting what's happening within the whole all the time. I don't want to go too deep if it's too much, because it's this is the way my brain goes into.
I'm fascinated by it. Yeah, no, I'm here for it. I'd love to hear what you'd like to share today, because I think it's what I've found fascinating is when I've been learning a little bit about, energetics and things like that, is I think there's a tendency for people to think it's all kind of spiritual woo-woo, but it's actually very rooted in science and physics. And I think that when we can realize that this isn't just kind of something that people are supposing or, kind of making up, like it's actually, the science that we, exists in the laws of the universe, like it applies to us. And I think when we don't see that, it affects us. It's speaking to that disconnection that we have, that we are nature and animals, and just like everything else. And I think it's beautiful to see that connection. So I would love to hear more about that. Yeah, thank you.
Well, this is really what I do, I suppose, in as much as in the way I look at the human body, and the illness comes up as a metaphor. It's always really interesting to me how the metaphors for what comes up in the body is just a reflection of what's happening outside. So just as an example, like I've got a podcast now. The last podcast I did, a lady was talking about her urine infections and tightness in her lower body and abdomen. And it was just this reflection of her containing her anger. She'd been trained from a child, as many of us have, that anger is bad and that we're not allowed to express it. And it becomes a habit. So we form these habits within our bodies according to how we've been taught and how we've learnt in childhood. And that's a neural pathway, it becomes actually physical. And in her UTIs, it was just a reflection of her holding in her anger. And in these ways, the body shows these metaphors for what's going on, and the whole process. Healing, like for that example, would be releasing and just being able to let go. And there's so many examples of that we can use with things like with the cycles, with the menstrual cycle in particular. It's so affected by our emotions. So I could carry on.
That's really interesting. So, I think you have taught me that, our emotions are that flowing energy. And, am I right in thinking that, the metaphor of that is like the emotions are like the liquid kind of watery, and I'm sort of sensing the what is it? The kidneys would be, is it the kidneys or the,
keep going.
Oh dear, what's the word where do we store our wee? Honestly.
Bladder.
Can't think of the word. the bladder like being like a bowl, like a cup sort of, and it's sort of like being trapped. And I get the sense that, you know, it's like the same with the menstrual cycle, you know, the pelvis is that bowl and the blood being like the watery element. And, you know, I'd love to hear more because, you know, I think that it was you who said before that, you know, painful periods can be, you know, linked to, you know, that stored emotion and that you know, perhaps anger, perhaps whatever it is, but that sort of stored trapped emotion that's not being expressed. Definitely. Would that be right?
Yes, definitely. And so I'll sort of explain where I'm at the moment, because I've had some sort of deeper understandings more recently of the menstrual cycle, which I thought would be really interesting for you to talk to you about and for your listeners to hear. So, but if it doesn't make sense, please stop me at any moment. So
I will do, yeah.
So our menstrual cycle, as you know, follows the rhythm of the universe. So it follows this yin yang process, like a wave, you know. So there's a yin phase, a yang phase, a day and night, you know. So we follow these this universal cycle. And our bodies are designed for coherence. They're designed for healing. We're here to experience all sorts of things, but our bodies can heal, and they naturally want to fall into rhythm and coherence with their environment. So in the same way that you gather a group of women together, after 4 to 6 months, they will be menstruating at approximately the same time, because it's just an energetic flow that works between them. So we're really influenced by our environment, and it's not usually that conscious. It just happens when you're just within the energy of other people, and women in particular fall into this flow. And so if you imagine that cycle of the universe as being like one drumbeat, like a rhythmic, slow drumbeat a rhythm that we're attuned to. But there are things that disrupt that drumbeat, if you like. So when the egg that formed you was in your grandmother, how your grandmother was feeling and her emotional state and what was going on for her would have been like another drumbeat, like another rhythm that your DNA would have been programmed with. And then when you were born into the world, you live with your mother, and you know you're attached to your mother, and she's maybe got another drumbeat. So imagine all these drumbeats thumping away, you know. But if they're not resonant, you imagine a load of drums that just are not in time with each other, then you get this noise. You just get noise. You get a real sort of disruption to that rhythm.
Yeah,
and
signal and chaos.
So my point is, you're influenced by these different drum beats. So, and particularly also within yourself. So your emotions will affect that flow, that yin yang flow. Your emotions, if you're feeling angry and you don't express it in the moment, for example, you're holding on to it. It becomes resistant. It affects that flow. So then you've got these many dissonant, incoherent drum beats going on. And when a girl moves into puberty and she starts producing the hormones that are going to create the cycle, if everything's resonant, then then that cycle will arise and ebb and flow in the same way, because like you said earlier, like the hormones, I think of the hormones as being like they're quite they're fluid, but they're like a slow fluid, like the ocean. Like it takes quite a long time for that wave to build from the center of the ocean to get to the shore. So those hormones are coming up and they're being affected by the drumbeat of the universe, and the drumbeat from the grandmother, and the drumbeat from the mother, and the drumbeat from the siblings, and the drumbeat from within yourself. So this is where I believe that period problems can begin if that dissonance is present as the hormones begin their cycle. And as the hormones ebb and flow, the emotions are carried. The emotions are carried in the blood in Chinese medicine. So as there's this flow and this cycle, emotions come up. Emotions that are stuck inside will come up to the surface. And so when people talk about being really emotional when they've got a period, or within their cycle at certain points in their cycle, then usually what we do is we blame it on the hormones. Oh, I'm really hormonal. Well, actually, the emotion is there. It's just suppressed inside you. All the hormones are doing is with, as this wave rises and crashes on the shore, it just bringing it up to the surface to be released. So
That's beautiful.
So that's my sort of that's my vision of it. So I don't know if you followed that.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's such a beautiful way of visualizing and connecting with, you know, the influence of the people around us, but also what you said about hormones being like this wave, like this, you know, this current, and how it builds and then how it brings it up. It's like it's, you know, the body's just so wise, and it uses the menstrual cycle to bring that energy, that emotion up for release and processing, so we don't have to keep carrying it on through life. So when we label it as, you know, like a problematic kind of emotion, or like we're, you know, oh, it's PMS, and we're not really honoring the emotion, like it might be coming up, but we're not letting it release. I get the sense. So when that's all like struggling to come out, you're saying it's like being held on, held in the body.
It's being held, but it's nobody's fault it's being held. It's what we've learned to do as children, it's to do with our own safety and our own attachment within the family, and we tend to follow our parents in this. So you know, if our mum is anxious, then we'll find ourselves being anxious as well about similar sort of things, because we're aware that she doesn't feel safe, and so we have a reaction that is tends to mirror that within us. So I think that we're so influenced by the environment we grow up in, the culture we grow up in, the wider society, and what's happening or what happened in the past, because we have that connection with the grandparents, that there are far much more complicated. There's so many more layers. So it's not just about releasing or expressing. It's about understanding some of those deeper layers, understanding where that anger, maybe frustration, is coming from within you, and how can you release it? How can you release it safely? Because like I said before in that example I gave, many women hold their anger and their frustration inside of them because they've learned that it's, for whatever reason, that it's not acceptable to express it. So I think our hormones are really affected by our emotional state and our emotional well-being.
Yeah, and so is it sounds like it's connected to, you know, safety, and then how our nervous system sort of learns and responds to, the cues around us and within us, and that how the nervous system then affects our hormonal function as well, and our ability to, like you say, either express, and safely release emotions, or whether it's sort of being kept inside for, until it's safe to do so, which it might never be for some people. Fascinating.
So our so all of those influences around us, if they're all incoherent, if there's stress in the family, if there's stress within you as a person, then it all affects the flow, because you can't, that flow can't release properly if there's some resistance to it, if there's some holding, if there's some anger, if there's some frustration. Because if you think of those emotions, they're all tightening.
Amazing. So you were mentioning that in terms of coherence, so what are some things that we can do to kind of reestablish that rhythm, or soothe that rhythm, or come back into coherence with the people, the world around us, to help restore those rhythms?
Well, I think awareness is the key, first and foremost, because it's really connecting in with your body and looking for the truth, as in what am I really feeling about this situation, this person, these people, this whatever's going on. Because so often we get caught up in doing things that we don't want to do, or trying to be somebody that we're not actually, we're not authentically that person, putting a mask on, or there's a lot of things that influence our true heart rhythm, if you like, of the rhythm of our bodies. So sometimes it might be a case of just becoming really aware and checking in with yourself. Well, I want to do this thing that I've got to do, but actually my body is screaming, no, go and lie down and rest. I need more rest. So it's listening to our bodies a lot more. And it's a work in progress as well, because there's a lot of learning in terms of connecting in with your body. So the more you connect in with the body, the more you find ways of releasing the emotion and being truthful about what emotion that you're holding. Instead of we tend to push away the things that we find uncomfortable. We tend to push away our hurts, or our sadness, or our anger, and try to stay in this status quo, but it will always be affecting the body, all those things that we're trying not to look at. So I suppose so for me it'd be finding ways of, firstly, understanding and awareness of what's happening inside of you, and secondly, just finding a way to express it that's safe. So that might be journaling, it might be exercise, it might be singing, it might be something that allows some release for everything that you're feeling inside. It might be watching a sad film and letting the tears flow.
One of my favorites is putting music on and letting my body move to it, and making a lot of noise while I'm at it as well. And sometimes that might be a bit of a moan, or a growl, or a shout, or a scream, or a stomp, or something. But I find that letting my body lead the way in that can be really therapeutic, because otherwise I can catch myself in self-awareness and be like, oh, this is a bit weird, this is a bit awkward. And so I find music and movement really powerful for that.
That's just such a beautiful way, isn't it? Because that just release in the body. Yeah, the body wants to move. Yeah, fantastic. I love that.
And I'm curious. So if we're beginning menstrual cycles in our early years, and then we're out of coherence, and we're not finding ways to come back into coherence. We're not finding ways to connect with who we are and what our truth is and our authenticity, and express, in these ways that we're doing, you've just described. Mm-hmm. Is this something that will stay with us and keep manifesting throughout our adult menstrual life and, perhaps into fertility and, onwards as well?
It affects everything. Yeah, it affects everything. So, I mean, the menstrual cycle is only part of your body, one of your body's cycles, isn't it? So, wherever we're out of coherence and out of balance will show itself in some way. And yes, of course, some people live in a incoherent, unaligned way, and it shows up in their body. I think what's really interesting, and this is personal experience as well, is that if we look at the menstrual cycle as actually being really helpful, because if emotions are carried in the blood, well, then as that wave builds before a period, emotions come up, and then when you start bleeding, there's a release. There's such a lovely release, and people often feel so much better once they've actually started their period. But in menopause, what happens is that, like I said, that cycle's turning to that straight line, and women don't have the release that they had in the same way as when they were having a cycle. And I think this is why there's so many health issues that are related to menopausal years, because I think it requires quite a lot of deep work to negotiate the change and that transition, I believe. And I certainly found that myself. And I think really this is part of the reason why I started going deeper and deeper into this work before I hit menopause.
Oh, really? So, like in anticipation almost?
Well, it was I had no choice really, because I had a fibroid and I ended up with a hysterectomy. So and it was interesting, really. It's interesting now as I look back at it. It was awful at the time, of course. It's like, I don't recommend it as a way of finding a path to healing. But no, it was really clear to me later, and it's really clear for me looking back, that the fibroid is just a buildup of resentment. It's like a not letting go. It's like when the lining of the womb is just getting too thick and building up. So there was a lot of frustrations for me, and I was holding a lot of resentment, and I think that was when my healing journey really started, because it was quite clear to me that was what was going on. And even though I had the hysterectomy, it didn't solve the problem. That's the thing, is just because you have something removed from your body doesn't mean it's going to solve the problem. As in, it doesn't clear the emotional wounds that you've got. So I realized that and had to work on those emotional wounds that I was carrying. And, it's still an ongoing process, of course. But it's nice to be at this side and go, well, that was an enlightening experience. Rather than in the place I was, which is, and I'm sure many women will understand this, the heavy bleeding, the exhaustion, the anemia, all the discomfort, everything is, that bit's really grim, but your body's just really shouting at you at that point. There's healing to be done here.
That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm really curious if I can ask you, you said about needing to find ways to release in, post-menopause. Can I ask you what you do? What's your personal practice, if you have one, of tuning into what's there and, without having a literal bleed, to wash that away and cleanse that away? Is there something you consciously have found works for you?
Well, I think this has been the journey, if I'm honest. This has been, and the way I've moved through this transition. So there hasn't been one particular practice. There has been multiple changing, growing, and evolving different practices, if you like. So a lot of what I felt I needed to do was to dive right inside. So I actually, needed to have therapy. I needed to work on myself and work out where all that resentment was coming from that I was holding. So that was one part of it. I've used journaling particularly. I found journaling really, really helpful. Meditation, which I have done in fits and starts, but I now I was going to say trying to. I'm now attempting to be much more disciplined in my meditative practice, because I do believe the path to healing is stilling your mind and retraining that underlying thought, those underlying thoughts that just keep thinking and can drag you into a low vibration. So I'm really aware of where my vibration sits. And it's interesting because the course that I run, which is the root cause practice program, in developing the course, I felt like I had to live every single part of it, if you see what I mean. And I don't know, that was almost part of a cathartic way of going through this healing process as well. I'm a work in progress at, moving my body more, and I believe that you need to move your body as well. We can't just rely on it to always work for us if we don't keep it flowing and healthy. So
that's a good note to self as well. I haven't been the best with exercise in the last little while, but I do also agree that moving is a really good way of shifting up what's getting stagnant and bringing it up to be felt in that kind of way that you talked about with the bleeding as well, bringing it up to the surface. I absolutely love that. And I always say to people that I work with that, you can use your bleed as that opportunity to release and cleanse and reset, if you like, for, a new cycle. So letting what's present to let go, and then creating, a new intention, or, sort of seeing it like a fresh start, a new cycle to work with, and letting everything, move through in that cyclical way. I think it's been really powerful for a lot of people. So I really love that metaphor of the wave. And I think what you've just shared there about, finding other ways to connect inwards as being supportive for you in having, that healing process that's coincided with your menopause as well. A lot of people look forward to their bleed finishing because it's, an inconvenience and, painful perhaps for people as well. And, it does have its opportunities and benefits, but, on the flip side, I think the more that people are becoming aware of their menstrual cycles and, the powers and the opportunities within it, there's very much a sense of grief of that ending. Like when you finally learn about your, menstrual cycle awareness at a later age, it's like, oh, well, it's not going to be forever. So I really love hearing about how you're finding ways to connect in with your body and what's present for you, and connecting with those outer seasons and cycles as well, but then still giving yourself that opportunity. And it might not be, a specific time of the month as such, but love that more kind of, it sounds like, more maybe daily noticing, or just noticing when you're feeling, the chance to check in with yourself and still honoring yourself in that way. And I think that's really beautiful to share. So thank you.
I was just going to say, it's just this, it's the transition. People often get to into their 40s and will blame things on perimenopause, or start having their cycle starts to go out of rhythm quite often as people get closer to menopause. And I think it's about reframing it in our minds as an opportunity. This is where we move into that wise woman phase, of course. And I know it can sound trite, because when you're actually going through it, it can feel really difficult. But if people can use the understanding of this idea that actually what's happening is the emotions aren't coming up to be released in the same way. We can't release them as we used to, So a lot of hot flushes are also related to this this movement of emotion in our body, and we can recognize it as such instead of fighting against it, because the resistance to the fighting is what often creates more problems. That makes sense. Then there's a resistance to the transition. There's I don't like my body when it's aging. I don't like my body because it gets tired more, instead of I love where I'm going with this. This could be a real opportunity for me to grow in a different way and change in a different way.
And it's bringing up opportunities to heal and to connect with yourself on these deeper levels. And I really love that. This, I hear a lot of people finding hot flushes really challenging, but that sense, like you say, of bringing something up. And is it true in your experience that hot flashes have been precipitated by a particular emotional experience, or has it felt more random to you, and then you've kind of looked underneath afterwards, kind of going, what's this about, what's this revealing to me?
Well, as I've progressed through the transition, I've found it really fascinating, actually, because but this isn't just true of menopause, it's true of all sorts of things like digestive issues, for example. The slightest thought, maybe the slightest anxious thought that just skims through your mind has this physical effect straight away. So it can be just something little. I don't know, I'm just trying to think of an example. For example, when I was working in the acupuncture clinic, and maybe a client would ask a question and there'd be a flash of a thought like, oh, I don't know if I know the answer to that, or why are they asking that, or something, I don't know, whatever it would be, that would create a nervous system reaction. It creates a flash of anxiety or flash of anger, or and I would notice that any of those little sort of it could be tiny triggers, but would just create a hot flush, as well as physical triggers as well, because there's no doubt that there are certain foods, and there's caffeine and all that sort of thing does also have an effect as well. But I found it really interesting to notice the thought precipitated this wave of heat. So yeah, it's very interesting. The same way, like, imagine a child who is asked to stand up and say something, they'll flush. It's a similar, that they'll go red, and it's just a similar thing.
That's what jumped out to my mind, actually. Like when I was a child, I used to blush all the time. I would, if anyone looked at me, I would sort of go red, and it reminded me so much of that thought that would come, like, oh no, don't look at me, and then my face would go red.
Yeah.
So of course, everyone looks at you. Everyone notices.
Yeah.
It's so funny, isn't it?
Yeah. Wow. Noticing the thought, it's so important. It's so important.
Noticing the thought. Yeah. Thank you, Tracey. I've really loved what you shared so beautifully, and I love the sense of connecting with that drumbeat that we have within and without and around us, and how it can keep us all in tune and in rhythm, or we can become into such disharmony, and then how it affects us, manifest physically, in our cycles, but in our overall health. And just, hearing your experience and your perspective on this, it just adds such another layer to connect with. And I'm very visual, so I sort of have this, visual kind of in my mind of, this universe and this rhythm and this beat connecting us all. So yeah, I really love that. Thank you. And I'd just love you to share with us, a bit about the work you do and the course that you do, because, the way that you've shared on Instagram, and I invite absolutely everybody listening to please go and check out Tracey's Instagram, because she's shared for years now amazing posts on, physical symptoms, but then, what can be perhaps the emotional root cause of these things. And I've found it absolutely incredibly illuminating. And now you're sharing and teaching and training other practitioners to follow and take on this this way of working for themselves. Just tell us a bit more about it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's really lovely for you to say that. Yes. It arose out of my acupuncture practice, really, and working with people one-to-one, that there was always something more for me in terms of that sore knee or that frozen shoulder. There was always an emotional component that I felt like there wasn't much emphasis on. So that's where the sort of concept of my Instagram came from, really, writing about that. And then I developed a course called the Root Cause Practitioners course, which is to help practitioners, but I would say anybody that's working with people. There are people that come on and that aren't practitioners, just to help people interact, to help you interact with your clients or others. The course is a 12-week course. It's quite intense. There's a lot of personal work, because I don't believe that we can grow our practice unless we grow ourselves. And so it's about finding the root, helping clients find the root of whatever's going on for them physically. And it works on understanding how the nervous system is programmed and how the body creates these metaphors, and asking the right question to get to the right root, and how to allow that unfolding of what's behind a physical condition to release in a treatment room. So yes, I have got a new cohort that will be starting on the 25th of April this year, 2022. So if anybody's interested, just sign up on my website, which is www.traceystevens.org. And recently I started a podcast, which is just having conversations with just normal people. I'm saying normal people in inverted commas, like, rather than people that are necessarily practitioners, or anybody that really wants to have this conversation about wanting to find out what the root of their particular issue is. So the podcast is just conversations with people. So hopefully you can hear how thoughts and emotions create the physical illness. That's the idea of the podcast. And so please give that a listen. And that's the Healing Point podcast.
I really enjoyed there was I've forgotten what the lady was presenting with, but I was absolutely fascinated by the process you took her on in that episode, in that conversation, where she was talking about something, quite kind of, surface level, I guess, that, was what she was experiencing and was bothering her. And the way that you took her in and asked her questions and on a journey, back through time in her lifetime, and connecting all these dots, and how it actually went to somewhere that, on the surface you wouldn't have necessarily connected, but when you got there, she was so felt so seen and heard, and it sounded so true for her. And bringing that awareness to her of what, what this pattern was that was playing out for her across her lifetime, that was manifesting in this physical way. It was so special to hear that. So, thank you for making that, because I think it's, like, I'm interested, to hear that. But I think, I think it's so fascinating for, like you say, for people to connect that awareness of, instead of just saying like, oh, I've got a problem with my arm, and my arm being a separate thing to the rest of me, remembering that we are connected to that whole. And like you were saying, we are connected to the universe, like we are a mirror of what's going on, and that repeating through, is that drumbeat through time.
Is.
Yeah.
No. Well, thank you for describing that. It's really good, because that's the process I take people through in the podcast, is really what I'm teaching in the root cause practice program. So, and I hope later in the year to create a healing, like a self-healing program for people who aren't practitioners and don't want to do that side of things. But I love doing it. I'm really passionate about it. And I hope more people jump into this idea that, we're dimensional beings. We're not just, mechanical, structural beings. There's so much more to everything that happens to us in terms of our physical self. Each part of us, each cell that is in our body holds a picture of the whole. So if you imagine, think of DNA, for example. So DNA is that program that is within each cell in our body that expresses the whole. So us as a human being, we're also expressing and reflecting what is going on outside in a bigger way. So that's the precept of a holographic universe, is that each individual part contains the whole. So that follows in to the fact that what's happening within our individual bodies is also a reflection of what's happening across the whole world. For all the advances in medicine, we're a sicker culture and society than we've ever been in the history of man. So, there's something so out of balance. And we haven't got time to go into everything that's out of balance, but our bodies are often out of balance. Masculine, feminine, yin, yang, activity, rest. We're just out of balance. So that's what I mean by a holographic universe. We're all a reflection of the whole, and each individual piece of us is a reflection of the whole.
What a beautiful note to finish on. I think that's so important that we all take that on. Thank you for explaining it. I really appreciate that, and your wisdom and your time to speak to us, Tracey. Thank you. I'll put all your links in the show notes so everyone can come find you and check out not just your Instagram, but the important work you're doing on your course and your podcast. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Charlotte. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much for listening in. If you're loving this podcast and you'd love to help me spread the wisdom shared, please leave a review or rating, or share this with somebody who you think would love to listen in. I'm really passionate about creating ripples of change and getting this information to more women, girls, and people with a cycle so that they can reclaim their cyclic natures too. And if you'd love to dive in deeper with learning more about how to connect with your cycle and rites of passages, come and join our free Wild Flow Circle community, or choose a course and learn with me on my online learning hub. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, be well and go with the flow of your cyclic nature.